You've heard the myths, but what remains when the flood waters recede? In part two of our journey into the Great Flood, we move beyond legend into the realm of evidence. What was truly lost? And what still survives lies hidden in the ocean's depths, in the scars of shifting shorelines, and in the memories of ancient peoples. To understand what we lost, we must first trace the marks left by the waters themselves. At the peak of the last ice age, roughly 20,000 years ago, Earth's climate was radically different. Vast ice sheets locked away colossal amounts of water, and global sea levels were up to 120 meters lower than they are today. This created sprawling coastal plains, fertile lands where early human settlements thrived. When the ice began to melt around 12,000 years ago, the sea started to reclaim these lowlands, but this was not a sudden overnight deluge. Instead, it was a relentless, centuries-long rise that swallowed entire landscapes. Across the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean basin, and the vast expanse of Southeast Asia's Sunda Shelf, once inhabited lands disappeared beneath the waves. In some regions, the advance was so steady that communities could adapt and retreat. In others, sudden surges, possibly triggered by melting ice dams, forced mass migrations. One compelling case is the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. Core samples from the seabed reveal layers of sediment and shells from freshwater mollusks, abruptly replaced by saltwater species, suggesting that around 7,600 years ago, the Mediterranean burst into the Black Sea through the Bosporus Strait. This would have inundated fertile valleys, reshaping the lives of those who lived there. These events were not random. They followed a pattern written in the planet's climate cycles. While myths often speak of a single catastrophic night, the reality is more complex, a global pattern of rising waters, sometimes violent, often gradual, yet always transformative. Beneath the waves, the past is not lost, it is preserved. Archaeology has revealed that the oceans conceal not only natural formations, but also the remains of cities, temples, and trade hubs that once bustled with life. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, lies a massive stepped structure. Debated for decades, is it a natural formation or a man-made complex now swallowed by the sea? Whether by human hands or geological forces, its presence tells us that ancient shorelines were once very different. In non-metal, in the Pacific, basalt structures rise from a lagoon, a city built on a network of artificial islets. While not entirely submerged, it stands as a reminder of coastal engineering vulnerable to the ocean's rise. The Persian Gulf holds perhaps one of the most tantalizing mysteries. Sonar mapping has revealed traces of riverbeds, settlements, and geometric formations buried under layers of silt. Some researchers believe this was once the heart of a gulf oasis home to early human cultures before the waters claimed it. Along the coasts of India and Africa, divers have found temple ruins and harbor structures far below the current tide lines. These are places that oral traditions remember stories of sacred sites now belonging to the sea. What has survived comes to us in three forms: physical remains, stone, coral, and carvings shielded by sediment. Geological markers and layers, fossilized shorelines, and submerged river deltas. Cultural memory, myths, songs, and stories passed through generations, preserving an ancient truth in metaphor and allegory. Even in the depths, these remnants speak. They tell of civilizations that adapted, migrated, and rebuilt, carrying their knowledge inland, but leaving behind whispers for us to rediscover. When the waters rose, the people did not just lose their homes. They carried their memories inland, across the ancient world. From the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the mountains of the Andes, flood stories persist. They appear in cultures separated by oceans and millennia, yet they share uncanny similarities. The Sumerians spoke of Ziusudra, the survivor chosen by the gods to preserve life. The Hebrews told of Noah building an ark under divine command. The Greeks recalled Deucalion and Pyrrha, who repopulated the earth after a great deluge in the Americas. The Hopi remember a time when the world was cleansed by water, and their ancestors were guided to safety by spiritual beings. In Southeast Asia, tales tell of Naga serpents stirring the seas, submerging kingdoms that defied cosmic law. These are not isolated coincidences. They are cultural echoes passed down through oral tradition. Each retelling preserves fragments of real events, perhaps witnessed by distant ancestors. The details change, the names differ, but the core memory endures. Why do these stories remain so vivid, even thousands of years later? Perhaps because the flood was not just a disaster, it was a turning point. It forced migrations, reshaped trade routes, and altered the spiritual worldview of entire peoples. When a community loses its land, its sacred sites, its ancestors' graves, the loss becomes more than material, it becomes a cultural scar. That scar is carried in song, in ritual, in myth, until it becomes part of identity itself. The Great Flood, in whatever form it took, bound humanity together in shared memory. The water may have divided lands, but the story united voices. To recover the past from beneath the sea, we must combine history, geology, and technology. Underwater archaeology is a relatively young science, but it has already transformed our understanding of human history using sonar mapping, sub-bottom profiling, and remotely operated vehicles. Researchers can now detect ancient coastlines and structures hidden under layers of sediment. One example is the Gulf of Kamhit, India, where sonar scans revealed symmetrical formations, suggesting the layout of streets and buildings. Radiocarbon dating of artifacts retrieved from the site hints at an age far older than known civilizations in the region, though the interpretation remains controversial. In Doggerland, a vast plain that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, trawl nets and seabed surveys have recovered bones of mammoths, tools crafted by human hands, and traces of forests now drowned beneath the North Sea. This was not just empty wilderness, it was a thriving environment for Mesolithic communities. Scientists also study ancient shorelines through paleocoastal modeling. This technique reconstructs what the world looked like before the waters rose, allowing archaeologists to predict where human settlements might have existed. It's a way of mapping the invisible and targeting exploration where the odds are highest. But exploring these sites is not without challenges. Underwater currents, poor visibility, and the fragility of ancient remains make excavations slow and expensive. Sometimes entire expeditions yield only a handful of artifacts, yet each object recovered is a voice from the past speaking across the gulf of time. The science also raises an intriguing question. How many more cities, temples, and ports still lie hidden beneath the waves? If what we have found so far represents only a fraction, then the true scale of the Great Flood's impact may be far greater than we can yet imagine. Every sonar ping, every diver's descent is a step toward restoring a lost chapter of our shared human story. The ocean keeps its secrets well, but not forever. Some cities never truly died, they just sank into the silence of the sea. Off the coast of Japan, near Yonaguni, strange step formations rise from the seabed. To some, they are natural, the result of tectonic fractures. To others, they are the remains of a forgotten civilization, with terraces, staircases, and carved symbols in the Mediterranean. The ruins of Pavlopetri in Greece lie beneath just a few meters of water. This city, over 5,000 years old, was once a bustling port, complete with roads, courtyards, and intricate buildings. It sank due to earthquakes, and now sleeps under the waves. Egypt's Heracleion, once the gateway to the Nile, disappeared beneath the sea more than 1,000 years ago. Rediscovered in 2000, its statues, temples, and colossal stone blocks now tell the story of a city lost to disaster and time. Off the coast of India's Tamil Nadu, the ancient port city of Mahabalipuram is surrounded by myths of 7 pagodas. Local legends claim that only one remains above water, while the others were swallowed by the ocean in 2004. The Great Tsunami exposed submerged structures, giving truth to old tales. These cities are not just archaeological curiosities. They are proof that the ocean floor holds chapters of history we have yet to read. Each discovery challenges our timeline. Each stone recovered whispers of people who once walked streets now claimed by the sea. If so much of the past is hidden underwater, what else might we have overlooked? Could the origins of civilization be older and more complex than our textbooks suggest? Long before satellites, ancient scholars tried to understand the rise and fall of the seas. In Babylon, astronomer priests studied the heavens. Linking celestial movements to earthly events, they recorded cycles of drought and flood, noting that the stars could predict the seasons, and perhaps the coming of great deluges. The Greek philosopher Plato, in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, spoke of Atlantis, a mighty civilization drowned in a single day and night. Of misfortune, he claimed the story came from Egyptian priests, who described cycles of destruction by water and fire. Chinese chronicles, such as the legend of Emperor Yu the Great, tell of a ruler who tamed massive floods by redirecting rivers. This was not just a tale of heroism, but an early example of hydrological engineering, a science born from necessity. In Mesoamerica, the Maya tracked time with astonishing precision. Their calendar recorded long cycles, including catastrophic events that reshaped their lands. Some scholars believe these cycles may have been linked to climatic shifts, perhaps even global flooding events. These ancient scientists lacked modern instruments, yet their observations were sharp, and their records surprisingly accurate. They understood that the Earth's waters were not fixed, that seas could rise, lands could vanish, and human settlements could be swept away. Today, when we combine their records with geology and climate science, we see patterns emerge, patterns that suggest the Great Flood may not have been a single event, but part of recurring cycles stretching back tens of thousands of years. If they could see what we know now, perhaps they would nod in recognition, knowing that their warnings had not been in vain. Sometimes, history leaves behind artifacts that do not belong to their time. In the depths of the Mediterranean, divers found the Antikythera mechanism, a device over 2,000 years old, made of bronze gears so precise it could predict Eclipses track planetary motions and model the movements of the sun and moon. It is, in essence, an ancient computer from the highlands of Peru. The mysterious stone walls of Sacsayhuaman stand with interlocking blocks, cut so perfectly no blade can fit between them. The precision is so advanced that even modern engineers struggle to explain how it was achieved. Without steel tools or advanced machinery in Egypt. Traces of high-speed drilling appear on granite blocks at Giza and Abydos. Spiral tool marks to smooth to consistent, to be made by simple copper chisels, hint at a lost technology. One that could shape stone as if it were clay. Legends from India speak of Vimanas, flying machines described in ancient Sanskrit texts, capable of crossing great distances. Some scholars dismiss them as myths, but others note detailed descriptions of propulsion systems, weapons, and even aerial battles. These artifacts and accounts suggest that ancient peoples may have had knowledge far beyond what we give them credit for. Perhaps they inherited this knowledge from an earlier civilization, one that vanished, leaving only fragments behind. And if such technology existed once, what might have been lost when the waters rose and cities sank beneath the waves? Across the globe, cultures separated by oceans tell the same story in the Pacific. Polynesian myths speak of Hawaii, a homeland now beneath the sea. From New Zealand to Hawaii, the tale repeats, of ancestors forced to voyage after their land was swallowed by the ocean in West Africa. The Dogon people tell of a time when their world was remade by a great flood and of visitors from the stars, who gave them knowledge of Sirius, a star system invisible to the naked eye until the invention of telescopes. The Norse poetic Edda speaks of Ragnar, a cataclysm of fire and flood after which the world is reborn. The Maya Popolva tells of previous worlds destroyed, with the current one only the latest in a cycle. Native American tribes from the Hopi to the Lenape share flood legends, migration journeys, and warnings that the earth renews itself through destruction. They speak of underground refuges, or mountains where survivors waited for the waters to recede. The similarity of these myths is striking, as if they are fragments of the same memory, passed down in different tongues over thousands of years. When we weave these stories together, they form the outline of a single, global, forgotten chapter of human history. A time before the known civilizations, when humanity faced a cataclysm and survived but lost almost everything. And perhaps, just perhaps, the traces we find today are the whispers of that lost world calling us to remember. We think of history as a straight line. We imagine progress as a climb, from primitive tools to great empires, to the modern world. But what if that is not the truth? What if the story we've been told is only the last act of a far older play, a play whose earlier chapters were erased? Not by forgetfulness, but by catastrophe, the flood myths, the impossible artifacts, the maps of lands that shouldn't exist, are not random. They are the footprints of a civilization we barely remember. But here's the twist. What if some of that knowledge survived the flood, hidden in symbols, monuments, and secret traditions, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered? Look closely. The Great Pyramids design encodes astronomical constants. The layout of ancient sites aligns with star systems. The myths tell us when the catastrophe happened, and when it might happen again, and what if. This is why so many ancient cultures obsessed over the heavens, not just to worship the stars, but to watch them, to calculate the cycles of destruction, to warn the future that future is us right now. Because the patterns they saw in the skies, the ones they recorded in stone, are repeating, maybe. The question isn't just what we lost in the Great Flood, but why they wanted us to remember it, and if we are wise. We will listen before history repeats itself.